Let's take a look at the pelvis. This is a red chalk drawing of the three graces by Raphael, and Raphael clearly knows his anatomy and proportion. One of the most important things about the pelvis is proportionally it's about a head high. So people have a little trouble seeing the pelvis. We'll look at some of the landmarks. Here's a female pelvis, male pelvis. And we're talking now about the muscles of the pelvis. So the biggest one is your gluteus maximus. And your gluteus maximus originates on the back of the pelvis, sacrum, and inserts to the back of your humerus. Now that dotted line can make it a little tricky because it actually goes in between two other muscles, your outer hamstring and your outer quadricep, and ultimately to the back of your femur there. And it helps you lift your leg to the back. The next muscle we want to talk about is the gluteus medius. So it goes from, this is a side view, from the top of your pelvis down to your trochanter. It helps pull your leg out. Here it is on the right in side, front, and rear views. So looking at the back view, the gluteus medius much more straightforward because it goes from basically this here, you see your iliac crest, the top of your pelvis, and that's one of the ways you see it. Actually, from the back, I should probably include a little bit of the external oblique, which I sort of forgot to do from the back. So, external oblique. And then the next one down, if we're doing contour lines on the body, would be the gluteus medius. Gluteus medius. And it again just goes pretty straightforward from top of the pelvis to the trochanter, like this. So maybe I want to make my divisions a little more clear between these muscles and label it. Now if I switch to the front view, the gluteus medius is going to again be right below. Here's the external obliques, right? External obliques. And the medius again goes from pelvis to trochanter. So you do see a little bit of it from the front. It actually goes behind the next muscle we're going to talk about here, but this is an important contour line. The last muscle I want to talk about for now is a tensor fascia lata. Now you'll notice this is that muscle from the front, and the tensor fascia lata is mostly tenon. You can see it's a little bit of tenon up around the pelvic area, which is why we talk about it with the pelvis, and then it goes to your iliotibial band, which goes from your ilium of your pelvis down to your tibia. So your tensor fascia lata goes from about here on your pelvis to about here on your tibia. And again, mostly muscle fiber here. This is maybe where you could use different color pencil if you want to show that it's mostly tenon all the way down to here. It's a lot of tenon, and it goes down one side of your quadriceps. There's another muscle that goes down the other side, like kind of like this, which we'll talk about a little bit later. It's called the sartorius since I brought it up. But that's the tensor fascia lata is the last one I want to talk about for now. So again, from pelvis to the tibia here. So let's get back to drawing the pelvis and look for some of the big landmarks. The first we'll talk about is the sacral triangle. That's how you find the direction and location of the pelvis from the back. And again, that's really formed, the top 2 points of the triangle are formed by bone, and the sides are formed by the origin of your gluteus maximus. Now, if we look at the side view, your iliac crest, which is the top of your pelvis from the side, is where your external obliques rest and your gluteus medius starts. And remember, once you found the top of the pelvis from one of these landmarks, the pelvis is about a head high. One last thing I want to mention about the glutes is that people tend to draw them sort of like they're spherical, like a grapefruit or something. Since they have a little bit of an indentation on the side, they're much more of a donut shape. We can see the donut shape on this drawing by Jacopo Bertora on the left, and on the left side of the glutes on the drawing on the right by Peter Paul Rubens. And also on both of them, you'll notice how clear the sacral triangle is, that little triangle right above the gluteal fold where the glutes originate. We'll take a close look at this Raphael red chalk drawing and the pelvis in a couple different positions, and you can see all the landmarks we've been talking about pretty clearly. The sacral triangle, the little bit of a donut shape to the glutes, the iliac crest where the external obliques rest are all really clear. Also notice that Raphael has some faint lines around. He doesn't go right for that hard, firm contour line. I think it's an important thing to notice that he's starting light and figuring things out before he really digs in his drawing tools. So that's a really valuable thing for you to get out of these drawings. And if we look here at a Michelangelo drawing, we'll notice that he is doing the same thing. And if we look at these contour lines that he ends up resolving more darkly on down the sides of the pelvis, the part of the body we've been talking about, we can see the muscles we've been talking about really clearly. So you use the external oblique down to the gluteus medius, and then the tensor fasciolata below that, and then down to the quadriceps. And of course, Michelangelo knew his muscles backwards and forwards, and it's really valuable to look at these drawings and these other parts of the drawing around where he has these lighter notes, like that part of the upper arm there that's done in really lightly, and down here there's another little knee that's started. That's how he's starting these drawings. He's not starting with these dark, confident lines. He's starting lightly. And he could carve the figure out of marble. So if he has to start light before he goes to these darker, more decisive contour lines, then guess what? We all do. And it brings up another important point, which is that contour lines should be a function of how you're understanding the form and not just the lines around what you're drawing. When you're drawing a model, you don't want to copy your way down one side of the model, then down the other side of the model. Then it ends up looking like there's no structure, no bones there. You can see, take a tip from Michelangelo and start light, map things out, be careful, and really only dig in hard when you're sure about what you're seeing. Looking back at another Raphael red chalk drawing, we see the same thing when we look really closely. These lighter lines where they're mapping things out more simply before they incise the line in a more firm and decisive way. That comes later. So panning back out from this Raphael drawing, I want to make another point about the rib cage and pelvis. Your rib cage is fixed, your pelvis is fixed, your abdomen is flexible in between. So here's a figure, standing figure by Michelangelo again, and you notice there's an old French Academy rule of the shoulder over the weight-bearing leg is lower. So you see his weight's on the leg on the left, the shoulder on the left is lower. That's called contrapposto pose. And really, you can see clearly here too, the fixed form of the rib cage, fixed form of the pelvis, flexible abdomen in between. It's compressed on the left and stretched on the right. And that's important because you want to draw it like that, like two fixed forms of something flexible in between, almost like two tennis balls in a sock. Although of course the tennis ball of the rib cage should be about 1.5 times the size of either the pelvis or the head. So I was saying tennis ball, but really we're more likely to start with maybe an egg shape. So if you're using an egg shape for the head, a bigger egg shape for the rib cage, and maybe a ball for the pelvis, your head, if it's 1 unit high, then your rib cage would be about 1.5 times that size, and then your pelvis would be about the 1 unit. So that's an important thing to remember. So if we look at this pose, I mean, break it down a little bit. So shoulder higher on one side, hip lower underneath it, like a counterpoint seesaw. Rib cage and pelvis are fixed, abdomen flexible in between, kind of like an accordion where you have a little bellows in between that's flexible, right? What you don't want to do is make it like SpongeBob where he's just flexible all over and just kind of bends from top to bottom. So here's a Pontormo drawing with that foreshortening where you have the abdomen compressed in between the fixed forms of the rib cage and pelvis, shoulder down towards you, hip up towards you, and then shoulder up towards you, hip down towards you. So you see sort of foreshortened compression. This is another beautiful example, and I will be touching on a lot of these proportional things in the videos where we draw together too. So I hope these were useful and these drawings were inspiring, and let's get back to drawing.